Okay, it's 2 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Scott. I'm the Managing Director for the National Capital Chapter. Thank you so much for joining us for the Masters webinar. Those of you who have been members of the chapter for a little while know that this is a program that we do every year and have been doing for several years now in person. But just given everything that's been going on and having to shift around our programming and do some different things, we decided that we would go ahead and do a master's webinar instead this year. And so hopefully you enjoy a little non-COVID related content. I'd like to say thank you to the Education Committee, Chairman Margot Boischer, and then Andrew Welch and Carolyn Raymond for working hard behind the scenes to get all of this programming together for everyone. We are going to be submitting to CMAA for credit, so everyone that's on this webinar will receive 1.5 association activity credits from CMAA. So we have a lot of guests with us today, so thank you for being with us. And if you registered with your email address that is registered through CMAA and you're a CMAA member, you will also receive credit for the webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to our NCCMA chapter member and national board member, Mitchell Platt from the Cosmos Club, who's going to facilitate this awesome panel for us today. Mitchell, take it away.
Thank you, Kate, and welcome everybody to our Masters webinar today. This is different for all of us, but we are living a new normal. But one of the things that we are committed to today, at least, is going into some education that doesn't revolve around COVID-19. We may ask 1 or 2 related questions, but really focusing on some outstanding careers of these 3 panelists. And it's best for me to allow them to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Tim Mynahan, let him introduce himself. Go ahead, Tim.
Thanks, Mitchell. Yes, Tim Mynahan. I am presently the general manager at the Country Club of Fairfield in Fairfield, Connecticut. Arrived here in January to begin work here. My background is originated in military clubs. I managed clubs for the Army for the first 12 years of my career and made the move to the private club sector at Orchard Park Country Club in Buffalo. That was the first club that I managed in Buffalo. Then did about 5 years here in the New York metropolitan area, both at Scarsdale Golf Club and built and opened Hamilton Farm in New Jersey. But then that led me back to Buffalo, where I was the general manager at the Country Club of Buffalo most recently for nearly 18 years.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Terra, welcome.
Thank you. Well, I'm very pleased to be here. Started out, as one would say, with grease in my bloods, came up on the food and beverage side. I'm the general manager of Greensboro Country Club in Greensboro, North Carolina since June 15th of 2018. Large 2 campuses, 3,700 members. So very large, active family, 4 generations of legacies, which is very interesting and quite different from the other clubs I came from. Started out in city clubs, have managed city clubs, country clubs, HOA with high-end amenities, and now the 2 campuses. So very pleased to be here, and chairman of NCA National, sit on the CMAA Foundation board with Tim, and it's just a lovely, lovely industry. It's just fabulous. So thrilled to be here.
Thank you, Terra. Joe Mendez.
Yeah, so Joe Mendez, I am the GM at Riverton Country Club here in Cinnaminson, New Jersey, just across the bridge from Philadelphia. I started my club career with Mr. McFadden at the Union League in Philadelphia and have been in and out in clubs for 20-some years. The longest tenure, the one we'll probably talk about today, was at Radley Run in Westchester, PA. I was there for 11 years, just shy of 12. And I started, like Tim, I started here January 2nd. So fairly new, and it's been an interesting first 90 days.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to start with Terra this time for this question. Terra, talk a little bit about your longest tenure club, and we phrase this as the good, the bad, and the ugly. And how did you know it was time to leave? So it's a two-part question. To the longest tenure club, good, bad, and ugly, and how you knew it was time to move on.
The longest tenured club was the club I left. It was Desert Highlands Associated in Scottsdale, Arizona. Was there 12 years, 850 acres, 554 home sites, which is the key of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Managing an HOA, in addition to the country club high-end amenities, is far different than managing a country club. And I will say it's far harder, much more personal. When you deal with the 24-hour security, the architectural review board, the major difference is also these were second and third homes, so the seasonality completely different. I was a very ambitious, should I say, dare say, capitalistic type person, and always wanted to motivate and do my career mogul for advancement and monetary gain, to be candid, and the excitement, and also working the community and the industry. With this being a gated community and having no outside sources of revenue, because it was a members club, no ballroom, no other factors, and they wanted it to strictly be a members club, I was getting capped out at the higher end of the compensation ability. Plus we were landlocked, and that meant we couldn't add other amenities that were by far being introduced into the clubs, of bike paths, of an expanded fitness center, of all the other things. So the golf course, and because it was built as an HOA with lot lines on the property, there was limitations on what could be done. So approximately 2 years prior, I was sought after by this particular club that I'm at now because of my renovation experience, but it was not the time to leave. And then subsequently, the board changed over. They became very focused on agenda driven, and they didn't want to keep the Jack Nicklaus signature title at that point. They weren't going to involve him in the renovation of some golf courses, and it just didn't seem like the same location or the same place that was a particularly good fit. It took me from 2007 to 2014 to get a board policy manual, which they did adopt. Subsequent, after I left, I had 15 department heads, 9 department heads left, and the board policy manual went out the door.
Yeah, well, I can appreciate your fight. Everyone thinks that, you know, when you take over a new club or a big club, there's all these systems in place. You often find out there's no systems in place. You have to put the systems in place, and they take time because you're fighting culture and you're fighting history and tradition and a lot of different things, but from staff and members. So it's a tough time. Joe, the good, the bad, and ugly, your longest club, and how you knew it was time to leave.
Sure. So my longest tenure was at Radley Run Country Club in Westchester, and kind of rode the wave through 2008 through 2010 and all of the upheaval with that, followed by a significant flood and $1 million for tennis court renovation to restore tennis courts, and some upheaval in the membership over whether we should even have tennis anymore, and trying to maintain family atmosphere, and kind of got on the other side of it, and things were going pretty well. Felt like I kind of had gotten to a point where I wasn't sure I was going to be able to effectuate a lot more change at that organization, and at the same time a couple of board members kind of on the side away from the rest of the board and the membership started flirting with a couple of management companies and potential acquisition from Club Core or someone else. And when that came to my attention, I realized it may be time for me to start to look for something else, because there's not a great track record with retaining positions once those companies come in. So that's when I left. It was bittersweet, right? You spent a lot of years and put a lot of heart and soul into something and built capital reserves and invested millions of dollars into a place that hadn't done that for years. And the ugly is they've blown through all the reserves. They're struggling right now, and members revolted. The 2 board members are no longer involved at the club, and it's a shame when you see that happen. But certainly I think it was the right time for me to make a decision not to be there anymore.
Yep. And I could speak on that too. It's you hope to leave your club in good shape, but when they maybe don't listen as much at the end, and then you see what the after effects are. It certainly happened to the club that I left as well. I just want to mention one more thing while we're pausing here, is that there will be time at the end of this session for Q&A through the chat feature. So Kate and Margot come back on and help manage those questions. So please save them or start getting them together now so you can ask this great panelist some more questions. Tim, the good, bad, and ugly at your longest club, and how you knew it was time.
Yeah, actually, I had a wonderful experience there. I really can't say that there was much on the ugly side, but I will say that when I got there in 2002, it was never with the expectation that I would be there 18 years later. It really had a wonderful experience there. I think the thing that kept me there the longest was good governance. And really, in retrospect, I don't know that it was perfect governance when I got there. I believe good leadership sometimes helps create good governance. But I had a very strong team of people around me and, really had a wonderful experience there. The fact that I was there 18 years, I think is a testimony to the people that were around me. I certainly had opportunities to look at various other facilities clubs over that time period. I've often joked that I've got the best resume of interviews and clubs that I didn't get, because I certainly was out from time to time on some marvelous opportunities, but I always had a good place to come back to, and Buffalo was certainly very good to me over that time period. I won't say that there was any one thing that compelled me to leave necessarily. The job that I took here in Fairfield was mentioned to me by Dan Denny at conference last year. And quite frankly, I discounted it at the time. And then as I learned more about it, where it was located, to get back into the New York Met area, it gets me closer to family. And certainly the most compelling part was the opportunity to blow up a clubhouse and a golf shop and rebuild everything with a $20 million budget. I'm starting to rethink that right now because I'm in the full throes of that. So maybe I underestimated the scope, but I think it's all obviously complicated by what's going on right now. But I had a great experience in Buffalo, largely because of culture and governance.
Thank you. Okay, next topic, next question. And I promised that this would not be a COVID-19 discussion, but I'm throwing this one question in that relates to COVID-19. I'm gonna start with Joe Mendez. Knowing what you know now, specifically the COVID-19 and the pandemic crisis that we're all battling through right now, do you regret leaving, or would you have tried harder to stay and try to work through the problems and make things good there? And looking back now, knowing where we are right now with this crisis at hand, what would your answer be?
So I'm probably a little unique between the two in that I had a position in between my longest tenured and where I am today, kind of a shorter tenured. That change I'm very happy to have made. I think the place where I am today is much better suited from a culture and a financial standpoint to be going through what we're going through. Knowing what's happening at the club where I was there the longest, I kind of wish I was still there and I had stayed and tried to help them get through this, because I think they could have used some help with that. I think I may have been able to help. But the move I made to come where I am today, I'm happy that I did it, and I don't look back at all.
Tim, that's a loaded question for someone who's going through renovations and was at one club for 18 years, but it's fresh. What's your take?
I think you can't second guess decisions once you make them. You have to be all in. But I think during times like this, I think the thing that you're drawn to is the comfort of the familiar and the normal. And I just haven't been here long enough to create any of that. To be honest with you, and all the time that I've been here and the time I was interviewing, I still haven't seen this club serve a single meal. So I have really no context in terms of operations, but, I think you have to continue to move on. You look back at the career moves I've made in the past. No facility was ever perfect when you got there. There were always challenges, and all you really remember is, how you left it and not necessarily how you found it. So, I think in retrospect, the reasons why I made the decision to move are still out there pending, close to New York, walk to restaurants, visit family. Haven't been able to do any of those things, but certainly that's in the offing. And hopefully a year from now, when we open the new clubhouse, the reward will be then.
Okay. Tara, same question. No, now.
A little difficult to answer only for the reason is was thrilled to be at Desert Highlands, thrilled to be here at Greensboro Country Club, but during the timing of when this has happened, the majority of members at DH would have been leaving. A lot of them, it was second and third homes, and so through the summertime, a lot of them, large percentage wouldn't have even been there. And so you downgrade the staff and you minimize what you have as far as an operation. So there would have been less impact on the staff and the membership at that particular club. At this club, it's, I'm up for a challenge. I always love a challenge. And this, if our staff hasn't been so well taken care of, and I preface it with that, we're knocking it out of the park here. We have 2 golf courses that have never been busier. We're social distancing. The to-goes, I'm doing more in revenue except for the banquets than I would be normally. We only missed our budget for the month, and that's including guest fees by $14,000. And we're a $14 million operation. So it's been challenging because we're actually in the midst of planning a renovation of about an $18 million renovation, and we're still in the midst of that. But the staff it's really unified the staff. Since I've been here a little longer than Joe and Tim, for about 2 years, I have seen the operation work, but they've been very supportive, and they've been very appreciative of everything that we've done for the to-goes that we've been able to do, and for the amount of golf and tennis and all that we've been able to accommodate with them on our newsletters, on graduation pictures, dog pictures. We've made it fun. We've made it a value for them to really become and stay a member here. So it's been using competencies that we didn't know we had, but just bringing another competency to the table.
Okay.
Mitch, if I can just jump in one thing,
Go ahead.
real quick. When I had a conversation with a member the other day, and they said, I can't imagine you walked in the door and and then it closed. And I said, the good news is I don't have all of the preconceived notions of how things used to be. So it's not a big deal to try something out really outside of the box and different, because I don't know whether the members are going to like it or not. So for our idea creation, I feel like it was a good thing to be new and not kind of have all of that. All the members won't like that. They'll never do this. They'll never do that. So, it felt like it made me a little more free to be new in this environment.
Traditional clubs come with a lot of baggage that these things can't do. You can't try this because this is not the way it's done. So I understand that. I'm going to start with Tim with the next question. I had the pleasure of working at one club for 30 years. I was its general manager for 20 years, and people ask me, why did you leave? And I always tell people, you have to know when to come and know when to go. So knowing that on your longest tenure club, did you stay too long? Did you leave at just the right time or not enough time? What's your take on that?
I think I left at the right time for me and for the club, quite frankly. I certainly look back fondly at what we were able to accomplish there. Did an awful lot of renovation work, an awful lot of governance and policy work over the 18 years. And I can confidently say, I left the club better than I found it. It was a great run. I said to the board when I left, I really left at the top of my arc, and that all I could do from that point forward was screw it up. So I really have no regrets. It was a great experience. And, looking at it from a timing perspective, I won't say my age, but at my age, if I was going to make a move, it needed to be in the next year or two. And the move I made was largely for quality of life reasons and, personal reasons, getting closer to family. Ultimately, when this thing is built, it'll be less rigorous than what I've been accustomed to. So really it was largely intended to benefit me in the long run.
Great. Tara, same question. Too long, not long enough, just right?
I think just right. As Tim said, when you get to the pinnacle of what you have accomplished and can feel very satisfied with the community, the members, the staff, it was just the right time.
Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was exactly the right time for me and for the club. And I think that I didn't stay too long, and I definitely left at the right time.
Okay. I also always make the suggestion to anyone listening onto this call, no matter what stage of your career you're in, you should have a career bucket list and have some things you want to accomplish and where you want to be, and think about timelines. You know, we talk about our age and my age of towards the end of my career, more closer to the beginning of my career, and you really have to think of those stages really far out. So when you're turning around and all of a sudden you worked at one place for 10 to 20 or 30 years, you know, you have a plan going forward. So I'll start with Terra, because this is a community outreach question, both CMAA, NCAA, and all professional development opportunities. How does that influence or shape your career? And certainly you're a testament to someone who has given their time and energy and efforts to our organizations, and we thank you for that. But how's that influenced your career?
I've always said that you get what you put into it, you get out of it. I mean, it sounds like an old cliche, but the education that both associations, and actually there's a third one that has helped shape my career, and that was CAI, which is the Community Association Institute when you're dealing with gated communities. The camaraderie, it's so unique and so special. And when you introduce that to board members and other staff members, when they see the sharing of resources and how they've all three organizations have really been on the forefront of getting education to the managers and the COOs, CEOs, to make them better. And so we can make our clubs and our community better. And then from the commitment that they have, the Guns and Hoses tournament, from golf tournaments, from Tee It Up to the Troops, from working with the military, but it all circles back to what CMAA and NCAA has to offer and has given us as resources, given me as resources. I feel like a poster child for both of them, to be quite honest. And I want to give back to an association that has given me so much and acknowledged the good efforts. And mentoring young people. I can't say enough about mentoring young people and bringing them up through the fold as they learn what we've all learned here, that it's special, it's unique, and it's really heartwarming, and it does make a difference. It makes difference to everyone's lives that you touch.
Thank you. And Joe, we have the pleasure of serving on the board together. We're not quite certain what this board year is going to look like, but I'll let you answer the question about your community outreach and service.
Yeah, so Mitch, for me, I would say CMAA was really the genesis of my career. So as a student at university, I was a restaurant person and always thought I was going to be a restaurant person, and had to get involved in a student organization, and CMAA was the one. And I met so many amazing people and got involved and networked and got the education that when I finished school, I stayed back in restaurants for a little bit and realized that really I missed it. And so my entire career path is not what I thought it was going to be. And it really is 100% driven by CMAA and all the things that it brought to me. And so the opportunity to be involved and give back has been a big thing for me. I've been fortunate and blessed to teach at university and be able to mentor college students and speak at many universities. And, you know, I think I'm at the point in my career where I was looking for a club where I wasn't taking over a turnaround, where I was being able to replace a retiring general manager. So it's coming into a stable situation so that I could focus time and energy on that service back to mentoring people. Also, the club has a huge charity component. It has an actual, charity committee and host a large tournament to raise funds for my golf pro. Has a daughter with a very rare disease. And we raise a couple $100,000 a year for this foundation. So, those things really have driven where I've wound up today.
Thank you. Tim.
I think like most of us, we get an awful lot out of our local network of club management colleagues. Certainly I had been in the Buffalo, upstate New York market twice during my career. And, even during the 5 years I was in New York, I still remain close with those managers up there. When I returned to Buffalo, I was able to go through the leadership and governance chairs at the chapter level. Certainly got an awful lot out of participating there. and really have been thrilled at the welcome that I've gotten here in Connecticut. I mean, especially now under these circumstances, the amount of information sharing and support that I've gotten from colleagues that I've just met 2 months ago has been amazing. And especially in the town of Fairfield, you know, the three clubs have, you know, really collaborated on our response so that, you know, one member from one club doesn't say, well, at such and such a club, they're doing this or that. So, you know, we've been unified in our approach to all of this, and, you know, the outreach locally has been phenomenal. And, you know, more recently, I've been able to be involved at the national level with the Club Foundation Board, and to be able to see the organization from that level is a completely different perspective for me, and gives me, you know, an amazing amount of respect to quite frankly, all of you, for the amount of time and energy you invest in it. I'm just one small piece of that, but you know, what I can see from that vantage point as the leadership and investment of time that you all make is quite inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would think we'd all agree it's a unique industry and hospitality, and we on our side of it in private clubs is unique in itself to the way we share information and ideas and help each other. So it's a great thing. The next question, starting with Joe, is are there any regrets for things you accomplished at your longest tenured club, and how will you resolve that at your current club? And before I let you answer that question, I told you before I worked at one club for 30 years, and there was one thing I did not accomplish. There was a member that always would complain about how all the food we would serve him was always ice cold. And I was determined before I left, I was going to take a ice water pitcher and dump it over his head and pour it over his head on my way out the door. On good terms, I never got to do it, but it is still a regret of mine. That I did. We'll deal with it before my career is over. I guarantee you that. But I also want to remind everybody in this pandemic crisis that we still have to remember the funny things about club management. Remember to laugh. Remember how we all got into this business. Have some fun and enjoy it. But tell us about some regrets and how you expect to resolve that. It doesn't have to be dumping water pitchers on people. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I don't think I have a story as good as that one. I've thought about that maybe a few times, but never planned it out to make it happen before I left. I think, you know, I think for me it was getting a clubhouse renovation, getting member buy-in on a clubhouse renovation and reinvestment. And like Terra and Tim, I think, you know, this club is ready to complete Ross restoration on the golf course and begin clubhouse renovations. And that, you know, to me was something that I didn't get done at Radley Run, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to rectify that by getting it done here at Riverton.
And regrets and things you want to try to resolve at this new club?
Yeah, not a lot of regrets. I mean, I think, you know, in Buffalo, like I said, I kind of left at the top of my arc. The one project that was still lingering out there that I was never able to get over the goal line was, you know, some type of fitness component. You know, we had done an awful lot of renovation work that was absolutely necessary, and I think the sequencing of it followed the correct path. But, you know, for 10 years before I left, we were trying to advance the importance and industry success that many clubs have had with fitness, and I could just never get that selling point done. I do believe it's in their future. It's probably a couple of years out, and that also contributed to my timing, quite frankly, because, you know, I would never have wanted to leave the club in the middle of a project. You know, I think the timing allowed me to finish the most recent one and be out long enough in advance of the next one that whoever followed me would have, you know, the opportunity to be wholly involved in that planning. You know, I think that would be the only thing I wish I would have accomplished. And with respect to doing it here, not a chance. So I may have to give up on that dream. Thank you.
Thanks, Terra.
You know, that's a really hard one. I can't think that when you mentioned that about the member, there was, and this is really an aside, but it's a funny and it's humorous that keeps us all sane. So we had a particular member, and as I mentioned, this was a homeowners association that I was at for 12 years. I used to have a record button on my phone, an automatic record button, because inevitably a member was going to sue us about something. The gravel on the sidewalk, on the road, something. But my personal favorite was an older gentleman, German gentleman, who owned 5 properties. He got in on the ground level, and he called up and he was extremely upset because javelinas. Do you know what a javelina is? It looks like a warthog, and they're very indigenous to the South Desert Southwest. But they were procreating on his lawn, and he wanted me to do something about that. So I guess an appropriate response to that one would have been probably a highlight.
Yes. Okay.
You can't make it up.
Now that I always tell people I write a book about all my stories in club management, but no one would believe them because they're just some of the stories are just unbelievable. Moving on to the next topic, which is of interest to some people, and I'll start with Tim on this question. How did you handle the interview process, and how did you know what to look for? And I think you mentioned you saw Dan at a conference, Dan Dennehy at a conference, and sometimes it just happens. That's how something gets brought onto people. But how did you handle the interview process while you were at this long tenured club?
Very carefully. Buffalo is a very small town. It wasn't just this interview, but others where you really have to be very cognizant as you're coming in and out of the airport. Staff around the club really couldn't know. I got in and out of town very carefully on a number of occasions, but I think it's important that, especially at the GM level, that those procedures be kept as confidential as possible. Because like I said, I mean, there were many times when I went out on interviews that were unsuccessful, and you certainly don't want anybody to know that you're looking to leave, because it's not really a reflection on the club where you're at. It's really a reflection of your own career drive and goals. So, but once I made the decision, certainly brought several members into my confidence, brought a couple of department heads into my confidence, because I needed to have references and in advance that process. So it really is something that's got to be done confidentially, but then you need to bring in some trusted people that will be your advocate in the long run.
Okay. Terra, the interview process, how was that handled for you?
Along the same lines, although the interest, the one president that I had at the long tenured club knew eventually, in fact, asked me to stay completely through their tenure because they didn't want to go through the search process, and became a confidant and a very good reference. This club came after me, which was the second time, which was very humbling to say, but it was a renovation experience. And I had been in the Greensboro area 20 years prior at another club, at Sedgefield Country Club. So I had somewhat of a reputation, positive, I'll say, thank you, to this club. I also, they wanted to be sure that it was a two-way street. And so because I had the luxury of this, the interview process was discreet, but I also asked to interview all the department heads before I set foot on the property, because I wanted it to be mutually exclusive, that it was a good fit for both parties. There were some long tenured employees that are still here, some 30-year HR director. There was, I think the shortest time period was a 2-year tenured department head. And again, I have 15 department heads because we have 2 campuses here. So it was an interview process that lasted, actually I came 3 times, and to interview not only with after the search committee, but then with the department heads, to be sure that it was a good match and a good fit for all combined. The culture here is so very different. It's that southern low country, to a certain degree, hospitality, very different than the kind of glitzy Southwest.
Okay. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would echo the things that were said already. And I agree with Terra. My last, I had 3 interviews for this position, first on the phone, the final 2 in person, but the last one, I spent 7 hours on property that day, a complete tour of everything, met with all of the department heads, met with the search committee again, and then met with the full board as well, to kind of I was at a point where I had the luxury, as Terra said, of making sure this was the right place for me and that I was the right person for them. So I think, that was really important as I probably look to have it hopefully be the last position I have. I wanted to make sure it was the right decision for everyone involved.
Okay, I'm going to go off script a little bit because, the four of us have gotten together before this event to kind of talk what we're going to say and talk about. But I'm going to ask you all a question, and before the next question that is coming, I'm looking for a one-word answer, and I think in one choice. This is a multiple choice question. In most cases, I believe that there's four main things to consider when you go to a new club. I think there's four things that, in my estimation, that rise to the top. And one is the culture of the club. The second would be geography and location, what part of the world you want to live in. The third is family and personal. And the fourth is financial. So I'm going to start with Terra, and I'm going to ask you which of those four were the most important in selecting this job and working at this club. So culture, geography, family, personal, or financial?
Culture.
Joe?
Culture.
Tim?
Family and personal.
Okay. Those are great answers, and there's not, you find when you do this process, financial usually never is the reason. Ultimately, there's so many other factors that you have to determine whether it's the right time to leave and get a new job. So with that said, the next question relates to culture. So comparing club cultures, I think Terry already mentioned you were coming from the glitzy Southwest to a Southern hospitality type environment. Which club culture fits you best, and do you know yet? My theory is it takes you 7 years to understand a club culture. So I'm in my 7th year at Cosmos Club, so I kind of understand it now. It took 7 years or so, almost 7 years to figure it out. But what would you say is better fit for you, the culture last club or this club?
For the time right now, I think this definitely this club for the time now. I would say for the time before that club. And so I think it may depend on the time in your career, the time in your life. I did know the culture of this city, as I mentioned, because I was here 5 years, 20 years, about a 5-year stint. And so I understood there was a lot of mutual members of both clubs, and I did understand the clubs. This one has much more legacy to it than the one I had previously in Greensboro. But it's a kinder, gentler, family-oriented, which is interesting because I don't have a large family. I do not have children. I commit other ways and things, but so that part's a little bit different. But the kinder, gentler Southern hospitality, I believe, fits me a bit better.
Okay. Joe, between the two cultures, the longest tenured and your current, if you know yet, which one fits better? Yeah. Do you know yet?
I mean, I think I have a good feel. I put a lot of time and energy into trying to understand it. I was fortunate to know several employees that had been here a while as I was going through the process. So I knew about the club from them. I'd say this club, because there's a culture within the membership of two things that matter to me. One is a willingness and desire to reinvest in the facilities, and two, an overwhelming support of the staff. And so to me, those two things were really, really important.
Great. Tim.
I would have to say it's too soon to tell yet. I mean, certainly I had, a wonderful experience in Buffalo, and that culture fit me very well. And, as a result of that, quite frankly, this was not an easy decision to come to. I really struggled with it, and I was upfront and honest with the committee and the board here in Fairfield, that it was a difficult choice, and I think they were empathetic to that. But on my third visit here, I had an opportunity to have some one-on-one time with the search chair after a lunch with the group, and again, along those same lines, talking about, struggling with the decision. And he said, I can certainly understand and appreciate that. He says, but something keeps bringing you back. And really, in that context, it's the people that I've encountered here from a membership standpoint. I think we all look to, the tenure of our predecessors and the department heads to give us a read as to what the club's culture is like. And I'm fortunate here to have a 20-year tenured superintendent, a 15-year tenured controller, 15-year tenured golf professional. There's only been 3 GMs in 50 years. So, I mean, there's good stability. And I think much like Terra said, very much a legacy family club. I have a board member who has been a member for 17 years. And during one of the project meetings, the project manager from Turner asked him, how long have you been here? And his reply was, well, I'm new. I've only been here 17 years. And, this is a club where unless your parents were members, you're new. I don't care how long you've been here. So it very much is a legacy and very much a family club in that respect.
I work at a club that's been here 141 years, and I was the new general manager for the first 5 years I was here. And I told them at the 5-year anniversary, the title new is coming off before general manager, and they all agreed to it in formal resolution. There's no money to do anymore. Joe, did I hit you on that question?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to start with you on the final question. Do you know how long you anticipate staying at this job? Is this the career-ending job, or do you know?
Well, my hope and goal and plan is that it is a career-ending, so to speak, job, or at least a general manager of a club-ending job. What happens after that, who knows? I've always been drawn to higher education, but I think 15 years is probably my max, and 12 years is hopefully my minimum, and somewhere in that range I think is going to be the right time for me to, step aside from sitting in this chair or in a role like this and look to do something different.
Tim?
I think that was certainly the expectation. Like I said, a big part of this was getting me nearer to family. I've got family in Boston and Albany. And almost the entire time I was out in Buffalo, no one ever came to see me out there. So, I think there's greater proximity, greater possibility of seeing people here. But yeah, I would imagine that this, and that's, I think what contributed to the weight of the decision is that, I certainly could have stayed in Buffalo throughout my career and retired there. But if I had one more move in me, it was going to be for one position and ride it out. So that certainly is the intent.
Terra?
Same thing. I find it interesting that we've not passed the complete renovation project, although they had one and revisited it. We've not even completed that. And they said, well, now, Terra, when we get to the golf course renovation, you need to blah, blah. So it'll be my last club.
Okay. I always like to throw in a Mike Tyson quote, one of our greatest philosophers of our time. He said, "No one has a plan until you get punched in the face." So we've all got punched in the face with COVID-19. So we're all in the same boat with who knows what tomorrow's going to bring. But we've finished the formal question portion of this webinar, and I know I've seen one question come up. Friend Dr. Pirani at the University of Delaware. And his question is that you all mentioned about mentoring young people. What are the internship opportunities for students this summer in your clubs? So I'm going to open that up, and I will say this as a starting point, and you all can chime in too. I know right now we're on a hiring freeze. We have 120 employees here that are furloughed. There is no way we're providing internship opportunities before we bring all our staff back. That's just my personal opinion right now. It's just not in the cards right now. We're back to depressing COVID-19 talk, but it was going to come. But that's the reality of the situation. Anyone else on the panel have any other thoughts on that?
Repeat that, Mitch. We're exactly the same spot. We don't know. We don't know if we're going to have a pool this summer. We don't know what dining is going to look like, and to try to promise a student an internship and then have to say never mind. Is probably not the place we want to be right now. We want to get our people back first, and then if we have the chance, we certainly will reach out.
Okay. So Kate, Margot, you're welcome to jump back on, and hopefully you fielded thousands of questions from our guests online, and if not, they can start asking questions out through the chat, I guess, or the Q&A, either function. Is that correct, Kate?
Either's fine.
Okay.
Margot, you had one, right?
I do, but I actually wanted to go back to what Dr. Pirani had asked about internships. I guess third party. I'm at a club currently that wouldn't hire any summer interns typically, but I think my advice to the students would be take summer classes this summer, because I think all the clubs are in similar positions that might not be hiring. And that way maybe you can get ahead and graduate early, and then you're in a different candidate pool when the time comes to get a full-time job at a club. And so if the colleges and universities are offering the summer classes, I think that would be kind of my advice, because I think it's a scary world not knowing what clubs are going to be hiring internships, but knowing that that's probably going to be the majority field. That would be my thought. But I personally had I had a question for Tim, and share what you want of what's going on. But I guess my question would be, it's intriguing to me to know that your club that you're currently at would be hiring a general manager in the middle of kind of a large construction project. So is there anything you can share about that, or how did you, one, take that on, and how did the club end up in a position where they were moving forward with a construction project, but also hiring simultaneously?
Yeah, obviously, I think they were looking for, someone to assist the very active member committees that are involved in this. My predecessor left nearly a year ago now, and there was an interim GM that was here over the summer. It was actually Peter Tunley, which is familiar to everyone, I think. So I actually, was handed the reins from Peter, when I began the process back in the fall. But, I think it's, indicative of the fact that, there's a lot involved in this. Like I said earlier, even more than I had anticipated with respect to the amount of planning early on. I mean, the last 3 days, all I've been doing is low voltage wire routing for TVs and computers and phones and postage machines and all those things. And it is mind-boggling the amount of detail that has to go into those thoughts. So I'm thrilled that I'm here now. I was actually able to, change bar locations and traffic patterns, even though I was coming in at like 95% design, because there were some things that just had to be fixed. So I would much rather have been involved. Actually, 6 months earlier would have been better than when I got here. So it was necessary. That said, there are a couple of positions that we haven't filled. I will be looking for an executive chef, an assistant manager, a communications person. But the timing of those is now further delayed by all this COVID stuff. So, so I've got to onboard a lot of people before we reopen the building.
Okay. I noticed that when Margot was speaking, there was a siren behind her. She's about 1 block up on the circle from where I am. So as it was going, I heard it coming from her computer into my window. So I need to hear that going on at the same time. We have.
Mitch, if I can jump in if there aren't any questions. There was one thing I wanted to talk about. So when you talked about career path and kind of how we laid things out for me, there was probably maybe a little unique to some in that I made a conscious decision early in my career not to relocate for family. So to Tim's point, so I had to then make a decision or an understanding that I may not advance in the same way that I may have if I had been willing to move around the country and kind of advance to a larger club and a bigger job. And so I began to say, okay, well then what does my career look like? And so I think for me, that was a really important personal decision. And for my family, that was a really important personal decision. All the way out to cousins, nobody lives more than 45 minutes away from each other. So we're really close people. And, I think that's something that people need to understand. And I would definitely say to younger managers that maybe have the opportunity to go ahead and take that chance to travel around a little bit and relocate when you can, so that you can, like Tim, kind of come home at the end and be around family and spend time near people and still have that career path. So I think my career would have looked different if I had not made that location decision very early on.
Yeah, and I made a geography decision early on in my career too. I wouldn't leave the Baltimore area because it's where I was born and raised, and my wife was born and raised, and we wanted to raise our kids there. So even though my kids were 13 and 15 when I came to Cosmos Club after working at Woodhome Country Club, I knew for the first 13 to 15 years, I was able to do a lot of things that other fathers couldn't do. I could go to school plays. I would have flexibility during the week. I can go to their games. I can come back in my suit. I was always the father on the sideline wearing a suit, but I missed a lot of the weekends and the time with them during those years. Now that my kids are, senior in high school and in college, they don't need me other than a credit card and a vehicle. So, we have a lot of quality time in the last 2 months because we've been shelled in together for a long time. But the weekends became more important to me, and that's working at a city club is affording me a little bit more weekend time. So, it's just different stages of your life, and geography to me was a crucial factor. But that's weighing in the family and personal situation too. So it changes in life. Now that I'm close to being an empty nester, doesn't mean I'm not thinking that, if there's one more step, which there's probably not, that I'm pretty free to go where I can.
And Mitchell, you, when you took the job at Cosmos, you didn't relocate your family. Your family still lives in Baltimore.
Yes. So my commute suddenly has become under an hour for the last months. There's no traffic on the roads. It's been a pleasure driving to DC and not sitting in traffic, and I can go any route I want. There's no traffic. But I've timed my routes to DC. There is no good time, and I'm someone that drives. I tried the train once, and it's tougher for me to get to a train. I don't live in Baltimore City, I live in Baltimore County. And for me to get to a train, either by the county or the airport, it's a challenge. And parking and getting on the train and getting to the Union Station, changing over to DuPont Circle, walk into work is a process. So I've driven from the beginning, but I've managed to know to come a little bit after rush hour and leave after rush hour, so it works out well. We have gotten questions from Army Navy. Thank you. So did you have the oh crap moment when you walked in the door of your new position after leaving something familiar? That's from Mr. Patrick King, our illustrious chapter president. Oh crap moment. Who wants to jump in? Joe, Tim, Terra?
I'll jump in. I do want to say one other thing, referencing what they were talking about, jobs. My husband, we've been married 40 years. The career mogul for women was more difficult. We've never made it an issue. Sure, you should never make it an issue. It's the best person for the job. But we lived in different states many, many years throughout my career and his career. And you have to have a partner that understands and will be supportive. And so I just bring that forward to the young people coming up into the industry. It's give and take. It's a different world now with FaceTime and things of that nature. You make career choices and you make priority choices, but sometimes you need to make a move in order to make an advancement. So I just bring that forward. And I'll get on this little bandwagon. It saddens me that a lot of the females in the industry just want to be party planners. And it's not your wedding. It's a member's wedding. And you have much more competencies to add to an industry and to what you are as a person than just going in and saying, I just want to be a party planner. So I've sat on many round tables where I hear that, and it saddens me to think that there's so much more to this industry and there's so much more to a career. So my old gracious moment was when I first got here, the amount of money that they had not put into the infrastructure of the two properties. And I came in June. By July, I had a complete appropriation of money for a reserve study. And they raised the capital dues substantially to comply with what needed to happen for their infrastructure in these two properties. And that was like, oh my gracious, I can't believe it's been neglected.
I will tell you, I had so many oh crap moments that there are too many to list, but I think people like to use the term low hanging fruit. I think I spent my first year on those type of issues that, and look, when you come to work at a club that's been around for, at the time, 134 years, everyone that works there had been there for, it seemed like 30 or 40 years. Everyone has blinders on, and it just becomes the norm and accepted. So when you walk in with a fresh set of eyes, it's more than like, oh my God, how can this be? But then you realize I realized I worked at a club for 30 years. And if someone walked in behind me, they'd say, what is he doing? What did he do for 30 years? It's the same thing. You don't see it anymore. So those oh crap moments came fast and furious in the first year, and I'm not sure they ever go away. Joe or Tim, anything else to add on that?
I mean, I chuckled when I heard the question because, yeah, it happens every single day. And I think early in my career, these types of transitions were much more familiar to me. I was moving every 4 or 5 years, for career advancement reasons. And, certainly had that expectation with Buffalo too, but after 18 years, you get out of practice. So there's been a significant increase in the level of anxiety with this move. I think made more complicated by the project and its scope and a lot of long tenured employees and some culture issues. I learned a new term. Margot's probably familiar with this, but I learned a new term when I got here, and it's called the Swamp Yankee. And this club affectionately refers to themselves as a group of Swamp Yankees, and it's a euphemism for cheap. They've got no shortage of resources. They just hang on to them for dear life. So, that's been a bit of a learning curve as well. But
I'll tell you one thing that comes in handy when you work for a club that's been fiscally responsible for 141 years when you get into a pandemic crisis, which we're into right now. So I'm thankful that Cosmos Club often put things on hold and moved a little slowly over the course of their history because they do, we're lucky, fortunate in many ways that we have what we have. Joe, any of those still happening probably, I assume?
Yeah, I'm sure they do. And I think, the opposite is every once in a while I see something that they do really well and think, oh crap, why didn't I think of that when I was at the last place? So I think it goes both ways, that you say, oh my God, that was such a simple solution to an issue that I never came up with myself. So I see it both directions.
Another question from Andrew Welch, one of our education committee gentlemen and board members. Andrew is asking, is the COVID-19 pandemic the biggest challenge that you've faced in your career? If not, and what have you learned? Well, I guess it says, what did they learn from it? I would say, what are you learning from it is probably more appropriate. And I will let you three go first and tell me if it's the biggest challenge and what you're learning.
I have some breaking news, actually. The relief package was just released by the Democratic leadership of the House of Representatives, opens up Paycheck protection program to all 501c7 organizations. I just got that hot off the press.
Okay, let's hope that continues. Let's hope it goes all the way through now.
Yeah.
So,
Still want to know how that impacts those of us that have kind of relegated ourselves to the employee retention tax credit, which you can't double dip. And so, how do we back out of that? Can we?
Well, we haven't taken the retention credit yet because you don't get the credit. You can't start taking the credit until July. So it's the first quarter.
Right.
We haven't taken any of that money yet, so we could. And here we are. We've gotten into a COVID-19 discussion. Does anyone want to talk whether or not this has been their biggest challenge? I mean, it's clearly nothing has ever been like this in our careers. I mean, 9/11, I remember clearly at my last club. And, it was weird and eerie that day. We closed the club and everybody went home and we sat around for a couple of days and kind of just mourned with the country. But we went back to the club that week, and Friday night we did a candlelight vigil out on the patio of our club, and members kind of came back to the club because it felt good. It felt good to be back home. I think during the recession, I found that people clung to the club because they wanted to drink and forget about their worries. And some of the wealthier members didn't want to be flashy and go to the flashy restaurants, want to go to stay at their club. This is different. This was a complete economic shutdown without warning that's lingered for about 2 months now. So this is the biggest challenge any of us has faced. And we're learning from it every day. And that's one of the reasons why we decided to have this session today, is that we talk about some other things, because eventually we're going to get back to some normalcy. But anyone else want to chime in on the pandemic crisis and what's your take on it?
So I think, Mitch, for me, the biggest thing is the constant unknown of what's being dictated. So I think in other crises, you kind of have the crisis and then you formulate a plan to come back from it, and you're kind of have control over implementing that plan. And whether it's a significant infrastructure issue, it's a fire, a flood, or whatever that thing may be, you're able to wrestle control, right? And we tend to be individuals that like to be in control of things. And so I think for me, the biggest thing of this is sitting literally every day at 1 o'clock waiting for the governor's press conference to see what is he going to let me do today or tomorrow. And then saying, okay, now based on what they're letting us do, how do we react to that? And so we have, 17 plans, and then the guidelines come out and they're completely different from any of the 17 projections we put out and we have to redo the plan again, you know, overnight. As you said, you get sometimes 1 day, 2 days notice of now you can start doing this. So that's the biggest challenge for me, is that feeling completely like you're out of control and you're waiting for someone else to tell you, okay, now you can do this.
Go ahead.
I was going to say exactly right. And that's complicated by the members are listening to the same news and they don't understand that you can't just flick the light switch and the staff comes back on board. You have all the sanitation and you have all your standards and processes in place. Absolutely.
I think one of the best quotes I saw through this crisis was when President Eisenhower said, "Plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." So, you know, I tell my members too here is that we unfortunately are going to have to be reactionary. And often we learned all through management classes and CMA classes and seminars, you have to be proactive. You have to have plans, budgets, strategic planning. Means nothing. You have to be reactionary right now. We have to be reactive, because if the governor or the mayor or whoever is your governing authority says, this is what you can do, guess what? That's what we're going to do. One of my members sent me an email yesterday saying on June 12th, they want to get their group back to the club, even if it means they want to sit on the parking lot, bring their own lawn chairs 6 feet apart. And my response was, we'd be happy to do it if it is in conformity with the law and the guidelines set forth by the mayor of Washington, D.C. I mean, I'll do anything for the members, as we all will, but I'm not going to break the law. I'm not going to go against the CDC guidelines and the guidelines set forth by our governing districts. There's another question here that gets away from COVID, thank God. Terra spoke about the on-site tours and interviews. When you were doing an on-site interview, what should you look for when they are spending their time trying to make everything look perfect and flashy? How do you read between the lines at an interview is the question.
I think an astute general manager is pretty perceptive to be able to understand, and I think they should prepare themselves for asking the hard questions, because if you have some tenure, you know the questions to ask to get the answers. You know what can be a canned answer and what, it's like an interview process on anything, or the reference, you know, you were the best person ever. Well, what does that mean? I think they have to drill down and be prepared and do your homework prior to even set foot on the property, which is pretty easy to do.
I would also add that the best time to interview is when you're gainfully employed, because you're more likely to ask questions that might offend a search committee or might set their hair back a little bit, because you know, ultimately you might want the job, but you don't have to have the job. And I think one of those questions I asked here when I got the job at Cosmos Club, and it was a pretty direct question about my predecessor and about the way his termination was handled and some really questions that they all looked at each other for about a minute before someone spoke. They didn't know where to go, because it just broke down the barrier. Are you willing to talk about what you didn't like about the last GM or why the termination went sour? You know, those are the kind of questions you can ask. You know, you don't want to find out these things, some things you don't want to find out after the fact, and you want to get to the bottom of it, and you want to put them on edge and put them, look, you're looking for a job, and you want to make them feel good, and you have to play to their ego at times. You have to make sure you butter them up. I mean, it's a whole psychological game too, but you also want to be honest and forthright and ask the questions that are really tough.
Yeah, Mitch, I would also say oftentimes you have the opportunity to dine at the club with the president or search chair or someone. And of course, you know, you're going to have the best server that they have taking care of you. And so for me, it's really about paying attention to the rest of the dining room at the same time, and to really see what's actually happening in the space and how the employees are acting and reacting to the situation that's going on, because you're going to get the salesperson, the best server that's going to, you know, be over the top gregarious and tell you how great it is and how much they love to work there. But if you can read people, and you've been around, as we've all been in this business long enough, you can pay attention to the rest of the team as they're interacting with the other tables and the members, how they're interacting with the staff, and get a really good feel for what that culture is like, I think, pretty quickly.
There's a question up here about, Tim, do you want to add something?
Oh, I'm good.
Okay. There's a question up here that says, can you guys share your plan post-COVID-19 on your banquet department with the different CDC restrictions? You know, again, as we mentioned before, there's so much everything is so fluid. We don't know what we're allowed to do. And I don't over plan these things, because if they say next week you can allow 20 people banquets and they have to be in a room that's a certain square footage, that's what we do. You know, it's really going to be the restrictions as they come out in DC for us. You know, your local jurisdictions are going to really determine what we're not going to push the envelope. We're not going to, you know, we have a concert series here at the Cosmos Club. We put 200 people in the ballroom every Wednesday, once a month. I mean, more than 200 people, elbow to elbow. It's not happening anytime soon. It's just not going to happen. And it'll happen when it's safe and appropriate to do so, when our members feel comfortable coming back to the club in those numbers. But anyone else have a banquet department guidelines? I know, you know, CMA has a section of their website, Be Prepared. NCCMA has tons of information about COVID, and you can get it from the National Restaurant Association. There's about 1 million places to get COVID-19 information. So I suggest, you know, looking at those places too. But anyone else have any other suggestions for?
Yeah, I think it's going to go well beyond what's permitted by your jurisdiction. A lot of it's going to come back to what members and groups are comfortable doing. I mean, I think there's going to be a hangover effect to this, regardless of what the law permits. We have a few outings that are scheduled for the fall that are already, you know, canceling the lunch gathering or the post golf, you know, cocktail gathering. I have a beach wedding in September that was originally 200 people is now going to be 20 to 40. Just because they've reacted, regardless of what, you know, it might be permitted by them. You know, people are scaling back things. So I think there's going to be both aspects, which even makes it that much more difficult to predict.
I think go ahead, Terra, go ahead.
That and the aspect of buffets. I mean, we knew we weren't having Easter. We knew we weren't having Mother's Day. The 4th of July, high probability. What is that going to look like in the future? In fact, we're reevaluating, as I said, the renovation. They had put a buffet line, which many clubs do a lot of times in the men's grill area and all. Is that even going to be in existence in the future? It's very...
The American psyche has changed in a lot of ways through this crisis. And, you know, one of the things is that we've learned a lot about ourselves and about our families and being home for so long. We've learned a lot of us have learned we have a lot of what we need. You know, the time of excess may be declining for a little bit, but I do think I'm bullish on private clubs, because I think when people go back out, they're going to feel comfortable going to their club, knowing that we're going to do everything we possibly can to clean, sanitize, proper hygiene, staff training, put the money into the proper places, and take care of our members as if they are a family. Well, you won't get that with the hotels and restaurants. I also point out that when the pandemic crisis started, all the hospitality workers that work for hotels and restaurants pretty much got shoved out the door immediately. And most clubs were between 2 and 8 weeks before they had to put people in furlough. Some clubs are still paying their employees. So, you know, we're a unique brand of the hospitality industry, and we have to hold on to that, remind our members about why we're such a special group, why clubs are so special and so important. And hopefully the government will consider that when they send this PPP plan through.
Mitch, I wanted to add to that. I think, you know, what we're assuming and expecting is that banquets and larger gatherings aren't going to be happening before we're going to be open for some kind of dining inside prior to larger gatherings being approved. So we're looking at repurposing our banquet and dining and banquet room space for a la carte dining for our members, so we can increase the capacity of service. So if it's 25 or 50% capacity in the new directive, that by utilizing banquet space, we're actually going to be able to serve more members and get much closer to what 100% of our a la carte dining rooms used to be by taking up banquet rooms with members.
As you all know, of course, we make so much money in a la carte dining that's just going to send us all the way to the.
So it's about usage and retention and dues, yeah. Right? I mean, to me, it's about servicing the members. Right.
No, it's engagement. Now it's all about engagement. So, yeah. Kate, I'm going to take one more look at the Q&A. I don't see anything new. And my theory is that, of course, someone just came up. What new program have you put in place for your employees that you're most proud of during your tenure? So what new program? This is not a non-COVID related question again. What new program have you put in place for your employees that you're most proud of during your tenure at any of your clubs?
So we're in process with our charity committee of creating, similar to what Jeff did at the Union League, to an employee long-term employee fund where there's an assistance program available to employees, and formulating formally a 501c3 that has that component to it. So I would say that will be, when it's finished, the thing I'm most proud of that I've been able to do for employees at a club.
And I would just say, from a culture perspective here at the Cosmos Club, I would say it was a little bit of a broken culture from an employee morale perspective, and we've built that over time, over a long time, and with the help of my new HR director and other senior managers, we really have emphasized the employee culture, building culture in so many ways. It's not just one way; it's really building a whole program, and I think we've managed to do that. And interestingly enough, when we called each employee individually to tell them that they were going to be furloughed, and their responses were just so gracious and kind, and almost, we understand completely. You're doing the best you can for us. And once we explained to them about getting more money in unemployment and stimulus that they would make here, it made the blow even easier. But we managed to stay in touch with them and care for them. And one of our stated goals at the beginning of this crisis was to care for our employees, and we continue to do that, paying for their health insurance in full. Even though they're furloughed, we're paying their portion of health insurance. We're doing things that just, anything we can to care for them. And I think that's been really kind of a hallmark of any successful manager's career, is that you put the employees first, and happy employees equal happy members. And, we just try to do that in every possible way, in every kind of encounter that we possibly can.
We did the same with paying the insurance is a big, huge on that. We haven't gotten to the stage that just has priority, and that's what part of the culture here, that the employees are part of what makes it unique.
Okay, so Kate, I'm going to say that we are at 3:15, and that I'm happy to end this session without any. I'll give one last opportunity for any questions to go. But you do know you can all reach out to us through Kate, and we're happy to answer any questions individually, by phone, or it doesn't have to be by Zoom. We do want to thank the panelists for taking their time. They're three really outstanding leaders in the hospitality and in the club management industry. We thank them for what they do. We thank them for their time, their leadership, and we just wish all of you safety, good health, and we'll be on the other side of this. We'll get together in person. We're looking forward to be back together in conferences and local education where we can see each other. And I don't know if we're going to do handshakes and hugs, but we'll see each other and maybe have a cocktail or two.
Yeah. And if you end up in our neck of the woods, please let us know. You're always welcome in our chapter, and we'd love to see you while you're in our area. So thank you so much, Terra.
Thank you all.
Margo, thank you.
Thanks,
Be
Mitchell.
well. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.